Available online, on digital, and on 14.5 megacycles along the gamma quadrant via the nervokinetic anal glands of the sympathetic death bats from planet Falk. This is the It Watched from Outer Space podcast. Keep washing your skis, Earthlings.
People of Earth, attention.
What you're observing may well be the beginning of the end.
You're twice as heavy as you were on Mars.
Give me your widest beam.
These things take over a man's mind. He becomes a robot.
In my case, sir, the question is totally without meaning.
Step into the future, a half-century from today.
Is this the end of our civilization?
The Martians can conquer the Earth in 6 days.
The same number of days it took to create it.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. We must remember those words.
Initiating Episode 5, The Giant Claw.
This is Tin Can calling Earth. Tin Can calling Earth. Do you receive me, oh wondrous blue planet? Hello, Earth.
Oh, f*** they're all going to fry anyway. Oh, it's on. Hey, buddies. Welcome to episode 5 of It Watched from Outer Space, a podcast that loves vintage sci-fi movies about as much as you lot all love burritos. Which is clearly a lot. I can see you, you know. And you can hold your stomach in, but I can tell. I'm Dan Gale from the S system, that's Somerset. I'm still in my space capsule, weightless and witless, and a billion light years from Earth, reviewing old movies until my oxygen expires. I'd like to come and meet you, but I think I'd blow your mind, so lean back on your radio, and listen to my hazy cosmic jazz. We are now 2 films into a triple bill of movies starring the awesome Miss Mara Corday. Last episode, we were all about her 1955 hit Tarantula. Can the next film in her sci-fi filmography be as memorable? Well, let me assure you, you won't be forgetting it in a hurry. And many thanks for all your correspondence so far. We'll read some of them out next time if we can get the printer to work. My sensors do indicate that we are but a few thousand light years away from the nearest office world, but until I reach it, I've got no option but to make my own printer ink using bodily fluids and the tiny amount of resources I have in this capsule. I won't go into the details, but it's a rather disgusting and physically painful process. The red, green and yellow inks are all easy to make given enough time, but I haven't mastered the blue yet. Maybe I'll just read them off the screen. If you have any thoughts, comments or memories of watching any of these films that we've discussed so far, you can get in touch with us via itwatchedfromouterspace.com, where you can leave us a subspace message, or via Twitter @itwatched, or you could just send us a letter. Although, frankly, the postage cost could be slightly prohibitive. We're also on YouTube, search for It Watched from Outer Space, but we've switched off the comments, because we can. And the air is stale enough in this capsule as it is. Please subscribe to this podcast using your podcatcher of choice, whichever it is, Downcast, Apple Podcasts, there's loads. Leave us a review too if you're feeling generous. If you're feeling really generous, there's a donate button on the website too, which doubles, I should point out, as the flush for this capsule's toilet, no matter how far away we are. Let's just say if someone could press it soon, I'd sleep a lot more comfortably. Okay then, on with... What's that? Oh damn. Incoming space advert. Well, we can't avoid these things, just grit your teeth, it'll be over in a moment.
Itchy, flaky tentacles.
I wanted to go to the prom, but I've got nasty-looking suckers. What female blowgoid is going to want to inseminate my salivary gland when they see these?
Have you tried new head, shoulders and brain stems?
New head, shoulders and brain stems?
Yes.
It's a new non-nuclear formula that's kind and gentle on your posterior funnel, leaving you up to 100% flake-free.
Up to 100%?
Yes.
So it could only remove 1%, making almost no difference at all.
Just try it for 2 parsecs. You'll be surprised at the results.
Hey, that new head, shoulders and brainstems you gave me really worked. I finally went on a date.
Oh, that's wonderful news.
And it went so well. We'll soon be hearing the slither-slather of tiny tentacles.
You mean?
She inseminated my salivary gland. Woohoo!
New head, shoulders and brainstems. Real homies don't get their suckers all in their mix.
Very nice. Now, will you forgive me if this episode's review is a little longer than usual? There is quite a bit to say about this episode's film. As I mentioned in the previous episode, Mara Corday only made 3 monster movies. The last 2, both in 1957. The one we're looking at today, entitled The Giant Claw, came out in June 1957, and the third, The Black Scorpion, came out in October. That film's special effects, which involved hand animating dozens of stop-motion scorpions, were incredibly intricate and time-consuming, meaning although it was filmed second, it was actually released third. The special effects on the giant claw, however, could never be described as intricate or time-consuming. In fact, as special effects go, it's even a bit of a push to refer to them as special. If you've ever had the privilege of seeing the giant claw, you may have a rough inclination as to where this review is going. I have a passionate love for this genre, all of it. For the classics, the so-so films, even the turds, I am very, very defensive of them. I can forgive the lousy effects and cheesy dialogues of the worst films that the 1950s sci-fi genre had to offer, simply because I enjoy them so much. But there's only so far one can defend a film like The Giant Claw.
No corner of the earth was spared the terror of looking up into God's blue sky and seeing not peace and security, but the feathered nightmare on wings.
Excellent clip for an audio podcast. Did you know there is no Columbia logo at the start of this film? No lady with the torch standing on the plinth, no sense of pride. It's quite telling, really. Like a fair few monster movies of the time, the film has a military setting which allows the filmmakers to include lots of stock footage of radar bases, flying jet fighters, scrambling pilots, and, cheekily, B-25 bombers pinched from the film 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. Even more brazen is the wanton city destruction shots stolen from War of the Worlds and Sam Katzman's own production Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, meaning, whether he knew it or not, through blatant theft, Oscar-winning master effects animator Ray Harryhausen actually contributed work towards one of the worst films ever made. It's funny how he never put it on his CV. The plot, boiled down to its bare bones, is about an engineer, who's also a military test pilot, discovering a giant bird from outer space is planning on building a nest and laying eggs on Earth. The bird, which is now destroying aircraft, is resistant to modern weapons and now seems to have developed a taste for humans via molecular osmosis.
Where did this bird come from?
Yeah, there's a piece of feather from the bird found in the wreckage. At least we call it a feather. We don't know what it is, only what it looks like. It has defied chemical analysis, the electroscope, every conceivable test. It contains no substance known on the Earth today No element recognizable by man. That bird is extraterrestrial. Comes from outer space. From some godforsaken antimatter galaxy millions and millions of light years from the Earth. No other explanation is possible.
Well, on paper that sounds quite cool, but I'd love to say it's just the poor special effects that make this film such a bizarre experience, but it's really not. We'll get onto those other aspects later, but in the hands of an effects expert, like stop-motion animator Ray Harryhausen, an animated giant bird might well have helped create a very interesting low-budget film. Harryhausen supplied a very impressive two-headed bird, the Rock, for his 1958 fantasy film The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, and Dave Allen and Randall Cook did stellar animation work in 1982 on Larry Cohen's Q the Winged Serpent, which had a very similar plot to The Giant Claw, albeit a far grittier and gorier film. The monsterless scenes of The Giant Claw are not that far away quality-wise from some of the other films that Harryhausen was working on for Columbia around this time anyway. Notably, It Came From Beneath the Sea or Earth vs. the Flying Saucers. There are some other similarities with those films too. The cast, for example, Maurice Ancram turns up in Claw as he did in Flying Saucers, playing essentially the same role of an all-powerful lieutenant general. He played a similar role in Invaders from Mars and would repeat it again in The Beginning of the End. There's a similar musical feel too, as library music by Mishka Bakalinakov was used in both Beneath the Sea, Flying Saucers and The Giant Claw. Producer Sam Katzman's name appears in large letters in the opening credits on all of these films. But crucially, this film doesn't have Harryhausen's. Having seen his previous routine sci-fi productions completely transformed by Harryhausen's lovingly crafted effects, and having noticed, probably with dollar bills in his eyes, that they were clawing in money at the box office, Katzman gambled that skimping on the expensive effects budget for his next giant monster movie would still produce a product that would be a box office success. According to an interview Mara Corday gave to author Tom Weaver in his book It Came From Weaver 5, Sam had it all figured out. When I went to meet Mr. Katzman, who was the producer, said Mara, he was raving on and on about the wonderful special effects people in Mexico that he'd hired. Boy, this is going to be something. I'm spending most of my budget on the special effects. So when we made the movie, and we were supposed to be looking at this giant bird, I was envisioning something really horrifying. And then I saw the movie. I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. Please note, listeners, incredible is a word that can be used to describe something at either end of the quality spectrum. The Giant Claw was an unforgettable film for Mara to make. She was pregnant at the time and tried to hide it from the producers in case they thought she was an insurance risk. Plus, Richard Long's interference with his wife's career was still in full swing. I felt horrible because my dear husband had given a party the night before when I was trying to learn these lines. And so I had to go to my mother's house with my tape recorder to learn the lines. Every time I did work, Richard saw to it that I would not be able to do my best. He did some kind of sabotage to me, every time. He did it to ruin me. He didn't want me working. He made that very obvious. If you've seen the film, you'll probably be wanting me to talk about the monster bird itself and how ineffectual it is. But should we be dwelling on the awfulness of the special effects? Isn't that too obvious? Hasn't this poor film had to endure a reputation long enough? What more could one possibly add to the piss-ripping this film has had to suffer over the last half a century? Let's give it a break. Just for a few minutes. the photography is perfectly acceptable. It's got crisp and contrasting black and white imagery, when it's not using grainy army stock footage, and everyone is well lit, and the close-ups of the characters look pin sharp, even on a DVD. Director Fred F. Sears, a former actor, seemed quite at home, having just made Earth vs. the Flying Saucers and The Werewolf, as well as Rock Around the Clock and its sequel, all for producer Sam Katzman. The music, whilst overexcitable at times, is more or less what you'd expect for a film of this nature. And Mara Corday herself is perfectly good in this film as a mathematician named Sally Caldwell, investigating the aircraft disappearances alongside Jeff Morrow, even hitting the occasional comedic line with style and looking radiant throughout. Mara, not Jeff. Unfortunately, you can't make a film about a giant bird without occasionally showing it. And about 25 minutes in, there it is. A flying creature which is supposed to be as big as a battleship, appearing on screen looking like nothing more than what it is. A 4-foot model string puppet, with no manoeuvrability save what gravity is giving it. Even if it had been operated by Jim Henson himself, it wouldn't look anything other than ridiculous because of its design. Star Jeff Morrow had said in interviews that when making the film, he had pictured a streamlined eagle in his mind. The creature literally looks like a child's drawing of a turkey. It has gigantic, round, googly eyes, little tufts of hair on its head, a long neck like a flamingo's covered in baggy, wrinkly skin, an enormous underbite giving the upper part of its beak a permanent sneer, and, as Bill Warren points out in his book, Keep Watching the Skies, large, flaring nostrils. Nostrils on a bird, on a beak, made of bone. Not only does this look silly, like it's channeling Kenneth Williams in the Carry On films, but the creature designers would have had to have consciously installed controls to make the puppet flare its nostrils, unaware that birds can't do that. The rest of its body is a little better. It's covered in black vulture or turkey feathers, but its wings are stiff and barely mobile, permanently outstretched even when it lands on the ground. Its feet, with its giant claws, are tucked up under its body, as you'd expect a real bird's to be. There's a chance that whoever designed the rest of the bird may not have done the face, and may not have been in charge of the puppeteering via those highly visible wires. So we should cut it some slack. Yeah, but then we have to remember, A, this isn't a bird. It's a creature from another dimension. It shouldn't look like a bird at all. B, even if it was a battleship-sized bird, it would have to flap its wings more than once every few seconds if it was to stay aloft. And C, if it really was a bird, wouldn't it be, like, pooing everywhere? Why aren't there huge white streaks across the skyscrapers in New York? That's mostly what birds do: fly, eat, squawk and poo. This film only covers the first 3 of those characteristics. It's not like that is, for me, the sole element that makes this film unrealistic, but it would have added a slight air of realism, or at least dark humour, if it had shat on a tank or something. The technical effects in The Giant Claw are presented on camera as if they really were the dog's bollocks. Unfortunately, there are no dogs. Only the bollocks remained, dangling from highly visible wires over a miniature train set in a warehouse somewhere in Mexico. The effects are credited to Ralph Hamaras and George Teague, who bafflingly allowed their names to be used on the credits. Teague worked on Things to Come and The Amazing Mr. X in the 1930s and 40s. Hamaras, an all-rounder who had worked as an effects artist, a cinematographer, and in the art department, had even less of an excuse, having been nominated for an Academy Award on 3 separate occasions. His first being in 1929, the very first year of the Oscars. His other credits show him as an uncredited crew member on films like The Black Scorpion, Disney's mega hit 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea as the effects photographer, and even Willis O'Brien's The Lost World from 1925, credited as Associate Technical Director. Now that is not a bad CV, to be honest. According to IMDb, Teague lived to be 91, but didn't have any film credits on his CV after The Giant Claw. He was 64 when he made this film, so perhaps he'd just retired. Or perhaps he thought he'd peaked. Either way, it's an odd parting gift for an undoubtedly talented man to leave the world. There is much to point and laugh at in this film, effects aside. The acting and the dialogue do vie for the audience's attention, or sympathy, with some incredible examples of more is more from lead actor Jeff Morrow, playing test pilot Mitch McAfee, who has taken it all very seriously, and Robert Shane as the incredible General Buzzkirk. These were actors who, by now, had this genre down pat. Morrow was in the classic This Island Earth and the third Black Lagoon film, The Creature Walks Among Us, and Shane had starred in Invaders from Mars. He'd recently just been in The Neanderthal Man as the film's title, and he had also recently revived Lon Chaney Jr. in The Indestructible Man. Neither Morrow nor Shane is helped by the crazy dialogue that they're given to say in The Giant Claw, and it appears they've both considered running at each scene at 100 miles an hour to be the best approach. Jeff Morrow's character of Mitch is so cynical, you'd think he was auditioning for Alan Alda's part in MASH. He is given some incredibly snide one-liners to mutter under his breath, some of which do work, most of which don't.
Mr. McAfee?
Or a reasonable facsimile thereof.
General Buzzkirk's respect, sir. He'd like to see you right away.
Oh, have a heart, Captain. I got in late last night. I just about fell asleep when you woke me.
Sorry, sir. The General says it's urgent.
So's my sleep.
My orders are to bring you to the General's office at once, even if I have to take you into protective custody.
Okay, Captain. Don't get in a tizzy. You keep your shirt on. I'll go get my pants on.
The scriptwriters didn't seem to realise that pithy one-liners only work if they're pithy and consist of one line, not half a paragraph.
3 men reported they saw something. 2 of them are now dead.
Well, that makes me chief cook and bottle washer in a one-man birdwatcher society.
It's one of those cockeyed concepts that you pull down out of Cloud 8 somewhere in sheer desperation.
McAfee, I told you that I haven't got time
Just a minute, General. This idea of mine may prove to be as phony as a $3 bill, but I still think it's worth a listen. You could hit it with everything but the kitchen sink.
We've got kitchen sinks to spare, son.
Robert Shane, on the other hand, is given a catchphrase, one I doubt even the scriptwriters realised they'd given him. On 4 or maybe 5 separate occasions, I've honestly lost count, he or his superiors list the various weapons they've used against the giant bird, only to fail each time. And damn it if they don't read it each time like it's the first time it's ever been said.
Guns, cannons, rockets. No wonder nothing touched it. Machine guns, cannons, rockets. Nothing touched it.
Our planes are armed with cannon, machine gun, and rockets. This should be the end of the big bird who was there but wasn't. Some new type of weapon?
No, with regular guns, bullets, and bombs. Anything you want.
And then there's Jeff Morrow's seduction of Mara Corday, consisting entirely of baseball terminology.
The kiss you take is better than you give.
A many-faceted creature, this Mr. McAfee. First engineer and pilot, and now lover and poet.
Oh, the line of poetry was from Shakespeare.
I know, but where did that impulse come from?
Left field, maybe.
I like baseball.
Or maybe just sitting next to a pretty girl. That's enough in itself sometimes.
Even sitting next to Mademoiselle Mathematician? Or should we stick to the baseball reference?
Oh, please don't.
There are figures and there are figures.
Inescapable logic. Corny, but true. You almost overwhelm me.
Almost?
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's finish the job. Look at that moon.
It would be a bit cheesy if it was the odd line here and there, but it goes on for nearly 2 minutes, and it becomes almost painful.
Speaking of baseball and left field, somebody warned me that you make up your own rules.
Whoever said that's no friend of mine.
But he's a friend of mine.
Sabotage.
Oh, much too dramatic. Let's stick to baseball and say instead, out, trying to steal second.
Back to the bush leagues. Finished.
A quitter, I knew it. No fight, no spirit.
Of course, the umpire could always reverse that decision.
No shortcuts. Must follow the pattern. You see, first the minor leagues and then the major leagues. I stick to the rules, Mitch. Sorry about that.
Ugh. It's even more bizarre that it's happening in the seats of an overnight sleeper plane, just a few hours after Mitch and Sally had both nearly been killed in a plane wreck. I'd have thought neither of them would be that keen to get on a plane again so soon after a near-fatal accident, especially with the monster that caused it still on the loose, let alone happily climb aboard one armed with an erection and a pocket full of pickup lines. You know, it's not actually the worst female character these sorts of films has to offer. Sally seems perfectly able to control a conversation with the military men and is as likely to deliver the cheesy quip as much as Mitch. At one point, when Mitch seems surprised that she knows how to load and shoot a rifle, she simply replies, "I'm from Montana." She does, however, relegate herself during the finale to fetching sandwiches and coffee for the men, whilst they busy themselves doing all the mathematic calculations that I thought she would have been written into the script to do in the first place. She's certainly more qualified than they are. She's the mathematician, after all. It's the first thing we see her doing in the movie. Math stuff, with a clipboard and everything. There is a lot of Star Trek science bollocks in this film, featuring antimatter, mu mesons, energy shields, and for all you John Pertwee fans out there, even some polarity reversal. The climax of the film is extremely underwhelming. The effects are at their most toy versus toy, and it's a shame we don't get to see the goofy-looking puppet just blown to smithereens. Stuff it full of dynamite, get a slow-motion camera on it, and boom! That would have got a tremendous cheer from the audience. It's such a shame. It is rather incredible to think that this film is meant to be taken seriously. Someone must have watched this at Columbia before it was released. They must have. They clearly worried enough about it to only have the poster show what appears to be a headless eagle attacking a city. And yet, any viewers intrigued by that would have immediately been put off by the trailer, in which a madly cackling stuffed winged turkey marionette is the very first thing you see. Even though other monster movies from that time have similar plots, they don't all come across like lost episodes of Police Squad. And yet, the Giant Claw does. It seems to be unconsciously playing with the conventions of 50s monster movies, whilst appearing slap bang in the middle of the period in which the genre itself was actually fashioning them. It's quite something. Have a look at Joe Dante's spoof monster movie Mant, as seen in his 1994 comedy Matinee. It has a lot in common with the Giant Claw. In this movie within a movie, there are reoccurring character actors from other sci-fi films like William Shalert from The Incredible Shrinking Man, Robert O. Cornthwaite from The Thing from Another World, even Kevin McCarthy from Invasion of the Body Snatchers, all taking on cliched military or scientific roles. Similarly, the Giant Claw has its own sci-fi dependables, Mara Corday, Maurice Ancram, Jeff Morrow and Robert Shane. Mant, like Claw, has over-the-top dramatic music. It has heroes quipping corny one-liners and lashings of hilarious pseudoscience. Dante has even admitted he borrowed some of the lines from the Giant Claw for his movie. But crucially, Mant is a spoof. A bigger budget, very lovingly done spoof with better special effects than the film it's taking the mickey out of, sure, but it's meant to be laughed at. The Giant Claw is, apparently, meant to be taken seriously, which somehow unconsciously makes it even funnier. The more I consider it, the more I am prepared to go on record saying, I think that Fred F. Sears knew this was a load of bollocks, and actively encouraged steering the production towards parody. When he was given thick slices of ham instead of acting from his performers, he didn't ask for another, less meaty take, or encourage more ham as one might have done if one was intentionally making a parody. He accepted the overripe levels of performance and used them anyway, something an experienced director of his standard wouldn't normally have done. So I think he knew what he was doing. Watch his film The Werewolf from the year before, and suddenly there's pathos, chilling villainy, even some actual subtlety in both the performances and the film itself. I know it sounds unlikely in a film called The Werewolf, but it's true. Check it out, it's really rather good. Mara, who comes across quite well in the finished film, said Jeff Morrow was a very serious person and treated the material like Shakespeare. Morrow's daughter said that her father was awfully embarrassed by the film at its initial screening in his local cinema, where the townsfolk knew and respected him as a local superstar. He had sunk lower and lower into his seat as the film progressed, and as the crowd's laughter became louder, he eventually went to wait in his car. I wonder if he ever got to see the end of the film. Reviews of this movie are perhaps less one-sided than you'd think. IMDb, for example, wavers between 1 star and 10-star reviews from people who can't believe what they've just seen and are either aghast with disbelief or in hysterics. San Francisco-based author and critic John Stanley, host of the Creature Features movie show in the 1970s and 80s, referred to it as inanely, incredulously delightful. Gene Wright, in the 1986 book Horror Shows, however, called it bird droppings. And British critic Kim Newman, when referring to the sci-fi channel quickie monster movies made by The Asylum, such as Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus and Mega Python vs. Gatoroid, said that 50s rubbish like The Giant Claw and 70s rubbish like Empire of the Ants have a watchable charm that the makers of these quickies will never manage. And I agree with him. I certainly know which ones I'd rather watch. I saw The Giant Claw, said Mara Corday some years later, in a theatre with my husband Richard, and I slunk down into the seat. I said, "Oh my God, isn't this dreadful?" And then I started to think, maybe Richard is right. I'd better get out of this business if this is what I'm going to be doing. He thought it was dreadful too. This more than suggests that if it was meant to be a spoof, neither lead actor had been told. So I can only assume that it's not. But dang it all, if it doesn't tick all the boxes, it's either a painfully awful film with agonizingly cheesy dialogue made by people with no concern for the end result, which does seem the most plausible explanation, or it's one of the most subversive meta-cinematic pastiches of the 20th century, up there with Airplane or the Lego Movie, for toying with the audience's expectations. All it needed was a scene at the end of the film showing the actors walking in on the special effects being shot and muttering, "Oh God, is that what it's going to look like?" And suddenly everything would have made sense. There is scope for someone to take this film and redo all the special effects, like George Lucas did with Star Wars or Wade Williams did with Rocket Ship XM. I don't know why they'd bother, but it would be an interesting experiment to see if the ripe performances from Morrow and Shane would work better if the rest of the film was less laughable. Look, it sounds like I don't like it, but I can't recommend this film enough. It isn't particularly poor for a large chunk of its running time, but when it does turn, oh my God, it doesn't just scrape the bottom of the barrel, it smashes through the barrel and plunges into the ground beneath. There is a German Blu-ray of this film available from Eyecatcher Media, which the reviews say is very good, although apparently the wires are even more visible in high definition. Which is saying something because they're pretty visible on DVD. It includes the original English dialogue or German dub, 2 commentary tracks, both in German, and there's an alternative opening title sequence for those kinky sods into that sort of thing, in both English, German and Spanish. I went with the standard definition DVD from Columbia in a 4-film box set entitled Icons of Horror Collection, Sam Katzman. The 16:9 print still looks gorgeous, and you can get this, The Werewolf, Creature with the Atom Brain, and Zombies of Mora Tau, all produced by Katzman, spread over 2 discs. It has a couple of drive-in style extras too. A Mr. Magoo cartoon, a comedy short entitled Midnight Blunders from 1936, and randomly, episode 2 of the Katzman serial Mysterious Island. There's also a trailer for every film on the set, and a few others too. It's a Region 1 disc, so you'll need a DVD player that can handle American discs. Also, you'll need to be a player with a taste for some of the cheesiest films you'll own by quite some margin. If you're not a fan of science fiction, you might assume that all monster movies from the 1950s are like The Giant Claw. Bad acting, terrible effects, no subtlety whatsoever. Well, you should know by now they're not, obviously. But you'll be getting what you expected. If you are a fan, The Giant Claw has to be seen to be believed. Several times in a row, with a bottle of whiskey. And some coffee and sandwiches. It is fucking awful, and I love it. Well, before this episode's sci-fi drama, there's just enough time for the cosmic traffic and travel. Firstly, we've still got delays on the Y25 system leading towards Kronos 4. We're getting reports of a clearance, but our sensors indicate it's still ongoing, and we've heard that the services are closed too, so watch out if you're heading that way. Best take an empty bottle. There's a hold-up on the outer ring road outside the outer rings of the planet Bubbalumptious. At least one lane has been vaporized. There were reports of some movement there earlier, but that turned out to be a fully cloaked space slug shifting in its hypersleep, so do expect delays there. And finally, queues in all directions, including forwards in time, but not backwards apparently, at the Akatork Mop Obrox interchange near Kujon Garopo Polyphil Office 15. Look out for diversions via the 18th and 20th centuries. Get in touch with any of your traffic problems, more from me later. This episode's drama from the American radio series X-1 is from the pen of one of the world's most famous science fiction authors, the great Isaac Asimov. I say American, he was born in Russia. We'll go more into detail on the man himself in later episodes, but he is, for those who aren't aware, one of the grandfathers of modern science fiction, having written over 500 books and come up with the 3 laws of robotics. In 1941, he wrote the story on which this radio episode is based, and which, in 1968, the Science Fiction Writers of America voted as the best science fiction short story ever written. So, no pressure to enjoy it then. A perfect example of thought-provoking social science fiction, as opposed to bug-eyed monsters, laser guns and giant buzzards made of antimatter. Here's this episode's drama entitled Nightfall.
Countdown for blast off. X-5, 4, 3, 2, X-1, fire. From the far horizons of the unknown come transcribed tales of new dimensions in time and space. These are stories of the future, adventures in which you'll live in 1,000,000 could-be years on 1,000 maybe worlds. The National Broadcasting Company, in cooperation with Street and Smith, publishers of astounding science fiction, presents X-1. Night Story. Nightfall by Isaac Asimov. Ralph Waldo Emerson speculated if the stars should appear one night in 1,000 years, how would man believe and adore and perceive for many generations the remembrance of the city of God? This was philosophically interesting. But on the edge of the galaxy, a planet swings on its orbit in a cluster of 6 suns. These suns hang in the sky above. Never less than 2 shine down through the entire 23.8 hours of the planet's day. The yellow light has burned down on the planet continuously, into the past, till the mind of man runneth not to the contrary. Theremin was a reporter for the Sarrow City Chronicle. He covered them all, from the night police beat to politics to the sports pages, and the city editor wanted him to cover the biggest story of the year, perhaps of all time. It was an interview, a particularly difficult interview. But then, since his first days as a cub, Theremin had specialized in difficult interviews. It cost him bruises, black eyes, and broken bones, but it had gotten him an ample supply of coolness and self-confidence. He didn't expect violence, though, from an astronomer.
You're from that newspaper? Well, you got a lot of gall coming here.
Well, now, look, Dr. Aton, it's only a job.
I've read your paper. You've been writing this observatory for 2 months now. You've attacked me personally. I have nothing to say to you.
Well, this is your chance to get your side into the paper. Look, Dr. Aton, I'll give it to you straight. 2 months ago, the observatory issued a press statement that the world was coming to an end. Now, that's the same story the cult of the Book of Revelations had been preaching. Now, when a scientist backs that up, it's news.
Our conclusions have nothing to do with the cult. The cult is full of superstition and mysticism. We're scientists.
You've got the people pretty angry.
It doesn't matter.
If I can't get the story from you, I'll have to go somewhere else.
Go ahead.
The paper can be pretty rough on someone who doesn't cooperate, Dr. Aton.
Young man, if you're not out of the observatory within 5 minutes, I shall call the police. Now get out.
The reporter walks down the long hall from the observatory. The light filters through the high, clear-story windows, the yellow light of Gamma, the brightest of the 6 suns in the planet's sky. Beta is almost at zenith. Its red light floods the landscape to an unusual orange. The planet's sun Alpha is at the antipodes, and now as Gamma sinks below the horizon, the red dwarf sun Beta is alone, grimly alone. It's a short drive from the observatory to Sarrow City, and the red light glares from the highway. The temple of the cult stands hewn from the solid rock of the Dormite Mountains outside the city, and in the inner courtyard stands Sor, the priest of the cult.
Woe to the unbelievers! Their souls will rot with the absence of light.
Tell me, Your Reverence, what will happen? What are you waiting for here?
The day of the coming. It is written in the Book of Revelations. It came to pass the sun Beta was alone in the sky, and the world was shrunken and cold, and men did assemble in the public squares and highways. Their minds were troubled, and their speech confused, for the souls of men awaited the coming of the stars. And the lip of the cave of darkness passed the edge of Beta, and loud were the cries of men, and there was no light on the surface of the world. And in this blackness there appeared the stars in countless numbers, and in that moment the souls of men departed from them, and their abandoned bodies became even as beasts. From the stars then reached down the heavens flame, and where it touched, the cities of the world flamed to destruction, so that of man and all the works of man naught remained. So it is written.
Dr. Sharon, you're the only scientist I could find in the city. Where is everybody?
In the hideout.
The hideout?
Yes, but the place bored me. I wanted to be out here where things are getting hot. I want to see the stars the cultists are talking about. Besides, they don't want me at the hideout. I'm too scrawny to survive.
What is the hideout?
Well, we professors have managed to convince a few people that our prophecy of doom is valid. We've got about 3,000 people. They're supposed to hide where the darkness and the stars can't get at them. We hope they'll survive and leave the records.
Survive? Survive what?
Well, how true it is, I can't say, but the cultists say that every 2,050 years, all the suns disappear, and there is a total darkness, and then they say things called stars appear. Of course, men go mad. They mix all this up with a lot of religio-mystic notions, but that's the central idea.
But that's impossible, isn't it? I mean, there are always at least 2 suns in the sky, most of the time 4 or 5.
There aren't now. Only Beta.
You mean that there is going to be worldwide darkness tomorrow, that all mankind will go violently insane? What's behind that?
Well, for one thing, the history of civilization of the world. We have located a series of cycles of civilizations comparable to our own, all of which, without exception, were destroyed by fire at the very height of their culture.
But is there any scientific theory behind this which would explain it?
Well, the University Observatory finished their calculations 2 months ago. And tomorrow there will be an eclipse of Beta so that the planet will become dark. That eclipse comes every 2,049 years. Darkness. And maybe those mysterious stars that no man has seen. And then madness and the end of civilization.
And you expect to live through this at the hideout?
They plan to photograph the eclipse and leave the records. And then the rest of mankind will know what to expect.
Well, what is there in darkness to drive men mad?
Have you ever experienced darkness, young man?
Well, no, but I know what it is. It's just no light.
Oh. Draw the curtain.
Why, what for? If we had 4 or 5 suns out there, we might want to cut the light down for comfort, but with only Beta...
Ah, that's the point. Just draw the curtain and then come here and sit down.
All right. I can't see you.
Feel your way.
But I can't see you. I can't see anything.
Do you like it?
Oh, it's awful. The walls seem to be closing in on me. I keep wanting to push them away.
All right, all right. Draw the curtain back again.
Oh, the light. Do you have a drink?
Right here. Now, that was just a dark room.
Yes, but it wasn't really so bad.
You're afraid?
Just darkness could do that?
This isn't just a metaphysical theory, young man. It's promulgated from observed data. Well, come with me.
Where?
The locked wall down the corridor. Were you at the Cerro City Centennial Exposition 2 years ago?
I was overseas on assignment.
Well, you remember hearing about the tunnel of mystery that broke all records in the amusement area?
Oh, yes. Wasn't there some fuss about that? The Anti-Vice Society had it shut down.
Oh, it was shut down, all right. But the Blue Noses had nothing to do with it. That tunnel was nothing but a mile-long passage through darkness. You rode in a little car, and it took 15 minutes to get through. Oh, it was very popular while it lasted.
Popular?
Well, there's a fascination to be frightened when it's part of a game. Absence of light is one of the instinctive human fears. People came out of that 15 minutes of darkness shaking and half dead with fear.
Weren't there some deaths?
Oh, bad hearts, but that wasn't the big danger. Now, which key is this? Ah.
Where are we going?
You'll see. No, the heart attacks were actually good for business, but there was something else. Here, I'll show you. I want you to see somebody. Latimer. Latimer.
Go away.
Latimer, I want you to meet somebody. This is Mr. Theremin.
No, go away.
Hello?
He's pushing me. Make him stop pushing me. Go away.
I'm not touching him. What's wrong?
Latimer is afraid. Aren't you?
The walls. They're falling in on me. The walls. I've got to get out. I've got to get out. Let me out.
You can't go out, Latimer. It's all right.
I've got to get out. Let me out. Let me out. Let me out.
At sleeping period, we have to give him a shot of morphine. Otherwise, he'd bat his brains against the wall.
What's wrong with him?
Nothing. Nothing but 15 minutes in the darkness of the tunnel of mystery.
Oh, that's impossible.
1 person out of 10 came out of the tunnel that way. That's why we had it shut down.
But why should darkness do that?
It's obvious men cannot exist without light. Longer periods of darkness would obviously be fatal. The scientific theory is that the consciousness of light is necessary for mental activity.
Please, Doctor, let me outside. Let me out, please. I can't breathe. They're pushing me. They're always pushing me. I can't stand here.
Well, there you are, Theremin. That's what 15 minutes of darkness will do. Man just wasn't built to operate without light. There are always at least 2 suns in the sky, most of the time more.
Just 15 minutes of darkness.
Now, look out of that window. Imagine darkness everywhere. No light as far as you can see. Black. Everything black. And, stars, whatever they are. Can you conceive it? No, your mind wasn't built for that conception. When the real thing comes, you will go mad. Completely and permanently. There is no question of it. Tomorrow, there won't be a city left standing in the world.
Why should the cities be destroyed?
If you were in darkness, what would you want more than anything else? What would it be that every instinct would call for? Light. And how would you get light?
I don't know.
You'd burn something. They've got to have light. They've got to burn something. And every city in the world will go up in flames. Well, shall we go back to my office, Mr. Theremin, and have another drink?
Through the skies, the red sun Beta shines alone. The wind howls across the city. It is cold, colder than man can remember. And as the hour approaches, the reporter goes out and speaks to the man in the street.
Excuse me, where are you going now?
Home for supper.
How about, what are you going to do tonight?
Oh, you mean about this star stuff? Look, I'll tell you, mister, I got nothing against religion, see? But it don't stand a reason that the end of the world is going to come boom like that. It just don't stand a reason.
Have you read what the scientists say?
I don't read stuff like that, only the headlines.
Well, how about the cult?
Well, now, like I say, I've got nothing against religion.
But you don't believe them either.
They've always been shouting about doom and sin. Listen, when you've been around as long as I have, you get to know the score. It's all right to preach Judgment Day is coming and all that, but just the same, I'm putting money in the bank.
How about darkness?
About what?
How would you feel if there were no light?
You crazy. How could there be no light?
Well, suppose all the suns went down at once. Suppose everything was black.
That's crazy. What's the use of supposing something like that? It couldn't happen. It's crazy.
That's all. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, look, mister, remember, pallet with 2 L's?
All this talk of scientific explanation, it's sinful, that's what it is.
Are you a member of the cult, sir?
Sure I am. Been a member since I was a boy. My daddy was a member, too. I've seen the books. It's all written down in the books.
Don't you believe the scientists' explanation?
Don't need it. Going to save my immortal soul. I'm going to stay on the mountaintop in a white robe while the stars carry me away to glory. Blessed be the stars. Amen.
What are the stars?
The glory, the breath of the heavens, the spirit of the ultimate. That's what they are.
The observatory has announced that it intends to take pictures of the stars.
Blasphemy. I sold my house. I gave all my money to the poor. Won't need it anymore. I'm going to heaven with the stars. Glory, glory, going with the stars.
The reporter checks the stock exchange, the stores, business at a standstill. Doesn't pay to buy anything today, not if the world is going to end tomorrow. There are predictions of economic collapse in the financial section, layoffs at the factories on the edge of the city, and through the streets the people will mill and turn, unsure, crying in fear or shouting with bravado. The story isn't here in the city, and so as the hour approaches, the reporter goes again to the observatory, high in the hills.
Look, Dr. Aton, if you are right, if the world is going to be destroyed, what is the difference if I stay here and observe and take notes?
Nothing, I suppose. You will be in the way. We have work to do.
If I stay out of the way.
Hello, hello. Oh, this place is like a morgue. It's freezing outside. The wind is enough to hang icicles on your nose. Beta doesn't seem to give any heat at all, the distance it is.
Why aren't you in the hideout, Sharon?
Me? I'm part of the race that isn't worth perpetuating. Who's got a bottle?
There'll be no alcohol today. It'd be too easy to get my men drunk. I can't afford to tempt them. All right, Thurman, you can stay. Time we took our positions, the observatory dome is up these stairs.
After you.
Ah! What is that? Up in the dome, quick!
What is it?
It's the plates. The photographic plates, they're all smashed.
There he is. A cultist.
He's going for the telescope. After him. All right, I've got him.
Let go. No. Let go. Must be destroyed. It must be.
It's all right. He didn't harm anything. Let him up.
Well, that's the high priest. I was talking to him yesterday.
All right. What do you want?
Nothing that you would give me of your own free will.
I made a bargain with the cult to give me certain data that you had. In return, I promised to prove the essential truth of the creed.
There was no need to prove that. It stands proven by the book of Revelations.
I offered scientific backing for you believers.
You made of the darkness and the stars a natural phenomenon and removed all its real significance. That was blasphemy.
The facts exist.
Your facts are a fraud and a delusion.
How do you know?
I know.
I suppose you think in trying to warn the world against the menace of madness, we are placing souls in jeopardy, huh? Well, we haven't succeeded, if that makes you feel better.
Your devilish instruments must be destroyed. We obey the will of the stars.
Someone call the police in Cerro City.
There's no time for that. Let me handle this. The eclipse is only a few minutes away. Look, you. Will you give your word of honor to cause no trouble?
I will not.
Listen. Just as soon as the eclipse starts, we're going to take you and put you in a closet with the door closed, and you will stay there. Then you won't see the darkness, and you won't see the stars. And that means the loss of your immortal soul, according to the cult. All right. Will you give your word of honor?
You have it. You will all be damned for your deeds of today.
Look at Beta. The eclipse has started. You can see the blackness against Beta. Get busy on those cameras. Check the exposures very carefully.
You're shaking, Mr. Thurman.
Yes, I don't feel very well.
You're not losing your nerve.
No, I'm just not used to it.
You could probably make the hideout.
I have been assigned to cover a story. I intend to cover it.
Oh, professional honor?
Yes.
Yes. Allah sofanet radrak. Allah sofanet.
What is that?
The cultist. That's the book of Revelations.
I don't understand it.
He is chanting some old cycle language. The book of Revelations was originally written in it. There are probably 2 million people in Cerro City who are trying to join the cult. One gigantic revival.
How do the cultists manage to keep the book of Revelations going from cycle to cycle if everyone goes mad? Who wrote the book?
There are some people who don't see the stars. The blind, those who drink themselves into a stupor, and children, to whom the world as a whole is too new and too strange for them to be frightened at stars and darkness. They would have memories, and that, combined with the confused, incoherent babbling of the mad, formed the basis for the book of Revelations. Oh, the cult will be riding high down there in the city. I hope they make the most of it.
Dr. Sharon, I've just heard from the hideout on the private line.
Oh, they're in trouble?
They are safe, but the city is a shambles. You have no idea.
Well, it'll get worse. But what are you shaking about, Dr. Ayton? How do you feel?
You don't understand. The cultists are rousing the people to storm the observatory, promising them immediate entrance into grace, promising them salvation, promising them anything.
How long till the total eclipse?
An hour.
Well, it's a gamble. It will take time to get a mob out here. If the darkness comes first, we're all right. Oh, look at Beta.
It's cut in half. Half of it is black.
Yes, it's getting darker. An interesting phenomenon. Oh, my collar is suddenly tight. Are you having any difficulty in breathing?
No, why?
Difficulty in breathing is one of the first symptoms. We have experimented.
I'm cold. Seems to be getting colder.
Yes, well, we'd better keep our minds on something else. One of the astronomers has a theory about the stars, far away to see in the light. He developed a fantasy about a planet revolving around one sun. It's a mathematical possibility. Of course, there couldn't be any life. Part of the planet would always be dark and without light. Well, it's obvious. Without light, there can't be any life.
It's time for the artificial light. We can't read the instruments.
Artificial light?
One of the researchers at the university worked it out.
Why, it's beautiful. Yellow light. After 4 hours of red. It's beautiful. Light. Light.
The dome is quiet. The priest in his yellow robe sways slowly as his lips move in the ancient tongue. Over and over, he whispers the invocation to the stars. The technicians hunch over the instruments, and the sky gradually turns a horrible deep purple red, and the air grows denser. Dusk, like a palpable entity, enters the room, and the dancing circle of yellow light about the torches etches itself into ever sharper distinction against the ever-gathering grayness beyond. Outside, Beta is a mere smoldering splendor, taking a last look at the world. The western horizon, in the direction of the city, is lost in darkness, and along the highway to the observatory surges a menacing, shadowy mass.
Mob from the city, they're coming.
How long till total eclipse?
15 minutes. But they'll be here in 5.
We'll hold them off. Come on, Fetterman, downstairs.
But there's no light down there.
We have to block the door. Come on.
I can't breathe. I can't go down there.
Take a torch. We'll take light with us. Come on. Ayton.
I'm here. Did you bar the door?
They won't get in.
All right, now, everybody. 1 minute till totality. 1 minute. Just before totality, I'm changing the plate. That will leave one of you for each camera. You know all about times of exposure. Now, remember, don't try to look for good shots. And if you feel yourself going, get away from the camera.
It's dark. It's getting dark.
Sharon, where are you? I can't see you, Sharon.
I'm right here.
30 seconds.
Look out. The priest.
I can't see him.
And the wicked shall perish, and the souls of the true believers shall be transported in glory to the stars.
You can see him against the torch.
Don't let him get to the
From
telescope.
the stars there reached down a heavenly flame, and where it touched the cities of the world, flame to utter destruction.
Grab him!
You shall not blaspheme! The world must be destroyed by the stars! It must be! Let me go!
I'll take care of him.
Stars! The stars!
5 seconds to totality. 4, 3, 2, 1.
The sky is black, and through it shine the stars. 30,000 minute suns shine down in a soul-searing splendor. It is more frightening in its awful indifference than the bitter wind that shivers across the horrible, cold, bleak world.
The stars. The stars. The stars.
Oh, no!
It's dark. 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 The walls. The walls are coming in on me. They're coming in. Light. 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 Darkness. Forever.
Light.
And ever. And ever.
Light.
And the walls
Light.
are breaking in. We did not know. We did not know. We did not know.
On the horizon, in the direction of the city, a crimson glow begins growing. 1,000 fires strengthen in brightness that is not the glow of the sun. 1,000,000 fires, as a world mad in the darkness screams in terror for the light. The night has come again.
You have just heard X-1, presented by the National Broadcasting Company in cooperation with Street and Smith, publishers of astounding science fiction. Tonight, by transcription, X-1 has brought you Nightfall by Isaac Asimov, adapted for radio by Ernest Kinoy. Featured in the cast were Wendell Holmes, John Larkin, Santos Ortega, Mercer McLeod, Alan Collins, Bob Hastings, and Roy Fent. Your narrator was Floyd Mack. Fred Collins speaking. X-1 was directed by Daniel Sutter and is an NBC Radio Network production.
Very interesting stuff. I mean, if you think too long and hard about it, it doesn't make much sense at all, but that might be a hangover of it being converted to a radio drama rather than a short story. But it doesn't mean it's not exciting and with plenty of contemplation after the fact. Asimov himself wrote, "The writing of Nightfall was a watershed in my professional career. I was suddenly taken seriously, and the world of science fiction became aware that I existed. As the years passed, in fact, it became evident that I had written a classic." That last word is in quote marks, so that's someone else's word, not his. As a rule, I'd recommend steering clear of any author who genuinely thought that their work was classic, even if it was. That's it for this episode. I hope Nightfall and indeed The Giant Claw have both given you much to mentally ponder over. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully we'll meet again when the stars align and I can get 4 bars on my Wi-Fi. Until then, take care, subscribe to the podcast, don't talk to any strange robots, and I'll see you soon. Bye. Or, as they say in the Omni-Pass-Ginty system, I know, my accent's terrible.
Communicate with us on Twitter at ItWatched, or email us at itwatchedfromouterspace.gmail.com. End of transmission. Keep washing your skis.
Honest to Pete, I'll never call my mother-in-law an old crow again.